Hello, hello, what is up? What is good? We are reviewing anime. The season hasn't been over for that long. I think I'm doing pretty good here. Uh, Especially when you consider how much I have to say about pretty much all of these shows. With that in mind, we should get going into it because I do have a lot to cover. And I got a lot of other shit I need to do today. So we will start off, of course, with the stuff I didn't watch, slash stuff that will be covered in next season's video. Solo leveling, I saw a lot of clips from this on Twitter and stuff. It's very like Sakuga core. The fight scenes are really over the top and flashy and well choreographed and stuff. And that's cool, that's impressive, but this type of isekai is the isekai that interests me the least. That is like very, very battle focused, very power fantasy type isekai, and really just had no appeal to me whatsoever. I think by seeing the fight scene clips on Twitter, I really got pretty much all I was going to get out of the show. And they were pretty impressive, but I don't know, not like that interesting, just like extremely technically impressive, at least the stuff I saw. There was nothing really there that like surprised me or shocked me. Mashal Season 2, I am interested in watching this at some point because I did enjoy the first season. And I really liked a lot of the flourishes and stuff that they gave to the adaptation, like a lot of the diegetic breaks and just the way they would draw the characters and stuff. Sorry, I'm really phlegmy this morning. I'm going to grab a bottle of water to help alleviate that as I'm going to be talking nonstop for a while. I also really love the soundtrack that they use in these. It's like this weird kind of like hip-hop turntablism breakbeat stuff that just kind of sneaks into a lot of scenes. So I think, I don't know, maybe I'll read the manga at some point, but I do like the adaptation as well, but just didn't have time. Dungeon Meshi we're going to be talking about next season. I'm really, really enjoying this, one of my favorite manga of all time, and then also just a really wonderful adaptation by Trigger. I have a lot to say about it, but that will be saved for when it's finished. Dosanko Gal, I have a friend who reads the manga for this and praises it a lot, and it does look very cute, and I heard good things about the adaptation as well. Just didn't get to it. I'd love to read the manga sometime soon, though. It just seems really up my alley in terms of kind of character and setting and premise and everything. Speaking of rom-coms I love, Bokoyaba Season 2 aired. I'm happy they're continuing with the adaptation of this. I think this is a series that has just gotten like better and better and better. I'm still eagerly awaiting every new chapter. So I'm happy the anime viewers get to get into like the real meat of the series, the stuff that I think really makes it great. Hopefully they'll just keep going and the whole thing will get adapted at some point. I haven't really heard too much about the adaptation. I watched like the first episode of both seasons because I was kind of curious about what they'd be doing in season 2, and it seemed fine. Nothing like too crazy, but fine. Sign of Affection, we watched the first episode of this. I really liked the premise, which is about a non-hearing girl who uses sign language to communicate, hence a sign of affection. Just kind of having her first romance in university and meeting people and kind of coming into her own and how she navigates all of these social relationships with her hearing impediment. It was neat. I like that you learn about sign language, you learn about this kind of culture. I'd even seen a lot of non-hearing people on Twitter praising it, which to me is like a very good validator. Because this sort of thing could also be like grotesquely offensive if they did it wrong. But, you know, I've heard it's just like a nice, cheesy rom-com kind of thing. Really up my alley. I think it's an anime original, otherwise I would probably just read the manga at some point. But I like the idea of this one. It goes on the long, long backlist. Metallic Rouge? I think it's Metallic Rouge, or maybe it's Metallic Rogue, and I wrote it down wrong on here. We watched the first 2 episodes of this, and it seemed pretty insane. The premise was very difficult to track and seemed like it had a lot of twists and stuff baked into it. The fight scenes were pretty cool. I was pretty curious as to where it was going, but at the same time I found it just so full of kind of like abrasive and unfriendly levels of like deliberate confusion and misleading. And this like really complex kind of sci-fi setting didn't really entice me very much. So I think if somebody was to be like a giga fan of this and persuade me to watch it, I would probably have a good time watching it with them. But probably not something I would like seek out on my own. It looks cool though. Bang Bang Bravern, I watched the first episode of. It was pretty sweet. In some ways, kind of like a standard mecha show, but in other ways, it starts to lean into almost like a meta pastiche of mecha. The scene that really kind of hooked me and made me quite interested in it is when the series that seemed quite gritty up until this point suddenly switches to kind of like a super robot show where the mech starts transforming and a theme song starts playing, but then it subverts it again because the theme song turns out to be diegetic. It's just playing in the speakers of the guy's cockpit, and when they cut to exterior shots, you can only hear it faintly emanating from the cockpit. And I was like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. So it kind of seems like maybe they're playing with the idea of super robot shows in general and some of the tropes, and just kind of weaving this into a more grounded, gritty, realistic war story, trying to kind of balance those two pathways. I'm sure it's good. I'm not like the biggest mecha fan in the world. I watch very few mecha series, so I think probably a lot of it would have gone over my head. But it is quite interesting, and I've heard it gets more and more interesting too. So again, if there was infinity hours in the day, I'm sure I would have watched this one, but alas. Where's my cursor? Oh, here we go. Buchigiri, we watched the first episode of. I enjoyed it. I don't know. The animation was nice. Good kind of lively character action and stuff. And the premise seemed strange but intriguing. There's a big focus on like delinquents. I always like delinquent, really over the top delinquent characters, and kind of the delinquent society that builds up in series like this, I think is a lot of fun. But again, we didn't get to it. This is the sort of series that I would typically say, oh, I'll read the manga at some point. But I think it was an anime original, so that's not even an option. Sengoku Yoko is a series manga by the author of like Spirit Circle, Planet With, Biscuit Hammer, and I've heard it is up to his standards, i.e. a really fantastic series. It also seemed like this adaptation was quite good, but again, just not enough hours in the day, didn't get to it. I probably will just read the manga in the end, because generally this guy's adaptations range between extremely disappointing, i.e. Biscuit Hammer, and then maybe like a slight enhancement of the work like Planet With, but generally aren't regarded as masterpieces in and of themselves, so this is probably just like a manga I should get to. Although it is to core, it is still airing into next season, so maybe by some miracle I'll get caught up. And then speaking of things that would require a miracle for me to catch up, this has been running for a long ass time now. I think they're up to like 100 episodes. I was watching it at the start, and then I fell really far behind, which is a shame because I was really enjoying it. I think they were doing a great job kind of modernizing the old anime while keeping a lot of its charms, bringing it into the real kind of liveliness and comedic potential of modern anime, which I think they did very expertly. I love the original series, obviously. Who doesn't? Rumiko Sensei is one of the gods of manga. But yeah, it's like 100 episodes, so I have no idea when I'm going to get caught up on this. Anyways, let's plunge into our first actual show, which is Undead Unluck. An absolute banger we are starting off this video with. This is, I think, the most pomo, like postmodern battle shonen ever. With very super pomo or just kind of modernist, very experimental direction, courtesy of director Yuki, who is ex-Shaft, and this is really the reason we watch this. Yuki has produced, in part or in whole, some of my favorite anime of all time during his tenure at Shaft. Shaft itself is in kind of a confusing state now. We can go on a long tangent of this because Monogatari is back, so I kind of want to say, oh, Shaft is back, but there is such internal turmoil and stuff that I don't actually know that for certain. But all of this Shaft alumnus that kind of carry their signature style into other studios, I'm immensely interested in. And even this series, which I knew of, and had seen advertised in Shonen Jump and stuff, but never really like caught my attention, suddenly rocketed up to something I had to see because of his involvement. But it is still a battle shonen as well. And as experimental as the adaptation is, it is still very much a shonen-esque adaptation. So retro in some respects, so like 90s feel, that it almost starts to feel a little bit Pomo, just that kind of like going back to those sorts of techniques to save budget and save time. But it might also be like budget-o. Like, it might actually be just legitimately to save budget and time. In fact, that's almost a certainty. But it gives the show like a very unique sensibility. This combination of kind of the Shaft era direction style with a lot of the flourishes of modern anime, but then a lot of the cost-cutting techniques and structuring of old shonen adaptations. So what do I mean by a Pomo battle shonen? I like to think of battle shonen in three primary eras. Pre-modern, which is before One Piece, and in many ways is all kind of standing in the shadow of Dragon Ball, although there was some stuff in and around Dragon Ball that definitely kind of fit this pattern as well. Modern, which is stuff inspired by One Piece and kind of built out knowing that people love One Piece, knowing that One Piece is the best-selling manga of all time, and kind of delivering on the promises of people reading shonen with the expectations of One Piece. And then postmodern, which is knowing that people have a certain set of expectations around what they're going to read and how it's going to develop, and then subverting them, deliberately setting those up and messing with them. This can be seen in, the basic premise of the story, how that unfolds, how that's presented to you, the world building of the series, how explicit is it, how much of a promise is it, how complex is it, same with the morality, the power structures, who is aligned with who, what kind of ultimate showdowns are we going to have. Basically, the modern era brought a more deliberate promise of structure and planning. Like, if you go back and read most pre-One Piece shonen series, they're really flying by the seat of their pants. Dragon Ball, obviously, a very good example where each arc just kind of pops up out of nowhere, and if it references past arcs, it's sort of incidentally, and there's no kind of forward-reaching sense of promises made of these are going to be like the villains in future arcs, these are places we're going to go in future arcs. All of that is very by the seat of its pants, very week by week, arc by arc. And then in the modern era, One Piece, of course, being the definitive example, it really sets out a lot of stakes. Okay, there's these 7 guys, and presumably at some point we're going to fight all of them, or befriend them, or they're going to be significant in the story in some respect. There's all these islands. We're gonna get there eventually. There's these different power structures that are eventually going to come into play. All of that being like a very explicit kind of promise to the reader, showing this sort of foreshadowing, showing this mega structure that we're going to explore together. And then the postmodern era, now it's more about very loosely indicating plans and structures. That something like, the great 7 titans of this era will be kind of thrown out there, but it could be indicating future arcs, or it could just kind of be a throwaway world-building line, or it could be something to be totally subverted later, where when in a single chapter these 7 hyped-up titans are, like, incidentally taken out by somebody. And then, as I said, they lunge in lateral directions, setting up your expectations that things are going to unfold via this structure, and then showing that the structure is irrelevant or superseded by some other big surprise element. It goes from having very strong heroes versus villains morality, to a more complex morality with many different factions. Again, as we see in One Piece, there's pirates, but some pirates are bad, some pirates are good. The world government has good and bad elements. The revolutionaries are like this third force. Almost every island has its own internal conflicts, of which there's kind of a difficult way to negotiate it down to just a bad versus good final clash. And then in the postmodern era, now we're getting a lot of moral ambiguity within individual characters and actions themselves. That it isn't just sort of like a complex, multifaceted structure, but every single element of that structure falls somewhere in the gray. We go from very kind of open, generic goals, like I want to be the strongest, to, again, in the modern era, this very deliberate promise, this forward thinking, where the characters have very specific, often complex and multifaceted goals that the story is eventually going to deliver on. And then in the postmodern era, it is still that same suggestion that there's going to be this like complex quest that will end in their goal. But the thing they want to do is just very bizarre and promises to move the story in a lot of kind of like weird directions and such. Let's dive into this further. So with Undead Unluck, we have this immortal undead man who meets a girl who's I think what happened here is I looked at all three of these words and my brain somehow simultaneously generated sentence structures that began with each of them, and then I just tried to say three different words at once. He meets a girl who's cursed with terrible unluck, that anyone who touches her is going to be struck down by some terrible unlikely occurrence. So he wants to harness this catastrophic ability to bring on his long-awaited death. He wants to die. He's extremely suicidal because he's sick of living. He's already been alive for untold millennia and gone through unfathomable amounts of suffering with his immortal body. But then, so like maybe you kind of imagine that the premise is going to be a series of silly, crazy, catastrophic unlucks as he tries to figure out what will trigger something strong enough to finally kill him. But then, this is like within the first chapter, they're found by a team of other folks that have these unpowers, like Undead and Unluck, who want to eradicate them. So yeah, we're probably going to be like fighting those, and each episode or arc is going to be puzzling out what sort of powers they have and how to use Unluck and Undead to counter them. But no, pretty quickly they end up actually joining this team. And then we learn that this team is working on a series of quests that are assigned by God. That God is telling them to go out and eradicate weird monsters or secure other people with these unpowers. So yeah, there's our premise. Okay, these negators, this team versus the Umas, the unidentified mysterious animals that God assigns them to kill. And they're doing this to preserve world stability because whenever they fail to, the world changes in sometimes very catastrophic ways. But sort of, like, they kind of do that. Not for very long, though, because you find out their actual goal is to kill God and to remove all of these systems and to stop going through all of this madness and just put the world in, like, a stable state. And then all of this is unfolding. You realize that this setting that at first you kind of think is just sort of modern Japan and modern the world, and it's just sort of a low fantasy abnormal thing. No, you start realizing that the world they live in is actually very, very disjoint from our world and is sort of like converging and diverging in time due to the punishments of this bizarre entity of God and their succeeding and failing in quests. And, all of these aspects of life as we know it being rules, these punishments doled out by God as punishments for failing quests with these ramifications that are very compelling, and just sort of imagining how the world will unfold with this social realism and being low fantasy otherwise to adjust to these fundamental changes. I don't want to get into spoilers beyond this. This is all kind of like premise and conceptual, but the specific examples are like very cool and very interesting. And it's like, you're just yanked around. Like, in every direction you're yanked around and thinking about what is going to be relevant, what is going to be important, what is going to be, kind of the anchor of our story that can start setting up arcs and repetition and loops and kind of the fundamentals of a long-running manga series, especially like a battle manga. But no, it's way over the place, all over the place. It's very Nishiosen-esque, I think, where the plot threads are woven through plot holes. This is something that I have praised the Monogatari series for a lot, where you'll have like a full and complete arc with just kind of like one little plot thread dangling. And it appears at first to be almost like a plot hole, where you're like, hey, wait a minute, they never accounted for this. They never accounted for the fact that, let's say they went back in time and changed something, and the astute reader realizes, oh, hey, that's going to have a major ramification for this other thing that we knew should happen. And then it's like, oh, haha, that wasn't actually a plot hole. That was the setup for the next arc. Or that was even the setup for an arc that'll show up like 5 arcs from now. And just that kind of like surprise, just that kind of like reward but subversion for the really astute readers, Undead Unluck also really leans into in a great way. And I think this sort of prevalence of postmodern shonen and the way that these stories are getting structured now, where all sorts of like plot foreshadowing might just be misdirection, or might just be parody or a trick, or a way to make something really surprising. I think part of it is in reverence to the modern Weekly Shonen Jump meta. Do I explain this further? Yeah, so you can be canceled at any moment. This was always the case, but I think nowadays, with just sort of the persistence of manga through digitization, it used to be that if you had a flop series that ran for like a volume, it just went away. People didn't even really know about it. It may or may not have gotten a tankobon release, but you're just kind of on to the next one. But now I think there's a lot more persistence in someone's like oeuvre and someone's total works as a person up until that point, such that if you make a flop series, it's just going to live on the internet forever. And it's kind of embarrassing. And what's inevitable is that some series are going to flop and be canceled very quickly. But what's not inevitable is having it have a giant awkward finish that just sticks with you. A super generic "and their adventures will continue" ending, which feels very lame if, you know, they're halfway through a fight, or if you already set up that they're gonna have 18 other encounters. And what I'm seeing these days is a lot of mangaka that like hedge their bets and give themselves escape hatches so that the series can end in a coherent way at any point, especially in the early chapters before they have some confidence and they have some momentum. Giving them ways to kind of like swerve to a satisfying ending from any point in the story. And I think, you know, this is done to varying degrees of awkwardness. And something that really helps, I think, is this sort of like Pomo ideology where it doesn't feel that weird if you suddenly tear down all of the structures that you were setting up, because that in itself is shocking and subversive with the way that you're writing it. Yeah, like the attitude of the series, I think, is just so brilliant, because they can like introduce such weird characters or such weird premises and either dive into them so sincerely, going into their backstory, building up sympathy for the character, making it very emotional, or they can, as like a joke, just be like, so what? She's a robot. You'll never know. And either way makes sense, depending on how much time they feel they have, how much breathing room, how much interest there is in any one of these elements. Okay. Well. So yeah, this series has nonsensical amounts of gore. Our main dude, Andy, fights by severing his limbs and using blood to propel his fists and fingers and stuff forward. It's really, really and absurdly bloody. The lore just leaps around to insane extents. Things just escalate vertically whenever they need to. The quest is all about trying to commit suicide or trying to kill God. There's this insane sexual element where we learned that the unluck powers are proportional to how much affection she has for someone and how intimate the contact is. So he, in his mind, decides that if they ever have sex, then the resulting unluck will probably be enough to kill him. And then there's just this kind of like weird climax intersection of the true petite and grande mort, so to speak, that really kind of builds this very bizarre psychosexual undercurrent of the series. How is this winning in Weekly Shonen Jump? How did Shueisha approve this to be sold in their magazine that's read mostly by like 13-year-olds? Because in the end, it is still just a battle shonen. You know, you couldn't really call it much else than that. First and foremost, this is a series about characters with powers battling other characters with powers in an ever-escalating spiral of conflict and stakes and severity. Our acts are typically the protagonists show up, you know, they each have their own cool superpowers. They square off against several threats. Everybody gets a fight, sort of, basically. The battles are more on the system side than the choreography side. This is another axis on which I think you can define shonen. And it's very interesting to look through the years and see how each side has kind of like trended in popularity. But basically, on the system side, the battles are more about how the specific superpowers interact with one another, and it's almost sort of like a puzzle. You know, JoJo's is by far kind of the most famous and definitive example, but you can think of like Jujutsu Kaisen often operates in this mode, although it's sort of hybridized. Same with Boku no Hero Academia. And then on the other side, it's the choreography side, where it isn't so much about specific interactions and stuff, more about the character's capabilities and feats of strength and speed and technique, and who can kind of overwhelm the other. It's not to say that one is necessarily even simpler or more complex than the other. It's just sort of like what gets highlighted. So yeah, this is definitely more on the system side. It's all these puzzles of position and, you know, how the different powers will interact in these edge cases and stuff. But there are really cool moments, too, of really crazy speed or explosions or just raw violence. I think this suits the production very well. In this kind of Shaftian mode, they have very interesting static shock compositions when the characters are just reflecting on what they ought to do and trying to puzzle out how all the different powers work and conversing with each other on these things. And then in kind of the critical moments where the plan gets executed and we see what's happened, there's bursts of really creative, very kinetic Sakuga. It's not just your typical flashy cling 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 sword fighting, but something truly weird manifesting in a very flashy, over-the-top way. Power systems are pretty cool, I would say. I like that it's all about very simple ideas. Most people, their power is just to negate one specific thing in the world. You know, I have the ability to make you not move. I have the ability to make things not miss. I have the ability to make things not hit. And then you just kind of take this one concept and stretch it as far as you can in terms of all of the different ramifications, all of the different situations. As I said, really diving into like the edge cases and the specific logic of when it does and doesn't work and stuff like that. My favorite, though, is the titular Unluck. I just love how much it varies in each situation, because, as I said, it's something random but unfortunate befalls you. So in some situations, it's like a plane that suddenly falls out of the sky, or a meteor comes in, or what's one that isn't something falling from the sky? You know, an electrical fire just starts all around you, a volcano. I don't know. All sorts of things happen throughout the show. It gets stronger and stronger as they learn to kind of control and manipulate the powers. But I like that. I like that it's like situational. At any rate, this series, I think, just really succeeds on the most basic levels of a shonen. Lovable characters and cool fights. While also being just, like, really addictively weird. And I think that was the most compelling addictive quality, is that you just never knew what was going to happen. Every twist was so engrossing. All these very subtle foreshadowing moments that a lot of them I only really uncovered by going back and reading the manga of the episode I had just watched. Having absolutely no clue at any point what was going to happen. You know, even though overall it's a battle shonen and most substantially it's a battle shonen, it does dive into all sorts of other genres and kind of like minor in-between arcs and stuff. You know, so you just knew at any point the entire structure and genre and mood of what was happening could totally 180. You know, at some points having absolutely no clue what was going to happen next, but at other points being just told so directly in a very shocking, exciting way, this is how it's going to play out. It's so good, man. I've never been so excited to finish a show because I want to read the manga. I want to get caught up on the manga ASAP. I haven't actually done so yet. I was reading a few other things first, but apparently it's ending soon. Apparently it's like in its final arc right now in the manga. So I want to get caught up. I want to be there for the end. It's so crazy. Let's talk a little bit about the production. Since I've already praised it quite a bit, and you know, I talked about how Yuki Yaze directed or episode directed some of my favorite produced series, and really some of my favorite series ever. Hidamari Sketch, my favorite slice of life. Like pure slice of life, Monogatari, Madoka. This is a huge genre departure. In many ways, it is kind of similar to Monogatari, but not really that much. Like, maybe in kind of some of the structural elements and in how some of the fight scenes play out, but that's really it. But it works really shockingly well. The rhythm of the series being, you know, 75% just conversations and kind of discussing what is going to unfold opens up tons of opportunities for the Shaft trademark style, which I think is mostly attributable to Yuki Yaze, of static illustrative image collage. That is. And so few series do this when it's like the easiest way to make things more interesting and more fun to watch, I think. When the characters are talking about something, don't just show them talking, show what they're talking about. Either by showing the character's imagination, showing the subject directly, you know, bouncing around to different locations to kind of build this mental thought process, or just rendering things abstractly that if they're talking about something they're afraid of, put in imagery that reflects that anxiety. It's so good. It's like something so unique to anime that I just really appreciate every time I see it. It's way too rare, but the series nails it. The big bombshells of the series often just come from a line of dialogue where you really understand how the situation is going to unfold, and all of the battles that often result from that are kind of secondary. But these I think are so expertly situated with this like audio-visual build-up. A great feeling of like thinking alongside the characters, putting together all of the pieces, both as, you know, your external knowledge of the situation, but also learning alongside the characters, and then kind of arriving at that big climactic revelation at the same time as them. It's built up so masterfully. And then the big action set pieces, such creative, weird visual effects, the way that Andy moves around, rocketing with his blood, just these crazy, extravagant sequences. It leans into this feeling of excess. And I know this is a very simplified way of thinking of like the budgeting and time constraints and stuff of anime. It's very like old 4chan A type thinking. But it does feel to me like they're charging up the budget. That with these like simple static shots that are still very expertly composed, you almost feel like the money stacking up that they then throw at the most talented and hardworking animators to just have these like really gorgeous, really over the top action sequences. But as good as all of this is, David Production isn't Shaft. And I was very impressed with David Production on this. I think this is some of their most powerful work, at least that I've seen. But it's not quite on the level of Shaft. And as I talked about right at the start, like, there is a lot of stuff here done for the shmoney. Long, very frequent flashbacks, including stuff to just, like, earlier in the episode or even, like, one scene before. Long recaps at the start of each episode, which is helpful because the plot is very complicated, but at the same time, it's like, could have got through so much more stuff if you didn't do that. Myriad reaction shots, this old staple. Anytime something crazy happens, which happens a lot, you gotta cut to everybody, which is especially absurd when, like, 4 or 5 major characters, part of their whole shtick is that they never show any reaction. It's kind of nostalgic, and it does kind of feel retro, but at the same time, it makes the pacing kind of stumble. It's hard to keep up the tension and the excitement and the bombshells when every scene kind of gets drudged out by some of these sorts of things. The emotional impact is thereby lowered. You're kind of taken out of it when, you know, somebody says, "Ah, that reminds me of what you said." And you know already what they said because you are watching and paying attention, but you still have to sit through like a minute of just showing footage from earlier in the episode again. Makes things a little tedious. Oh well. Still very, very, very happy with this one. We're gonna give this a 9.5. You know? Because, like I said, it could have been executed on a little better in some cases. But still, just a 1 in a million show. I can't wait to read the manga. And we are moving on to our next show after almost like 40 minutes. We still got a lot to cover. I'm going to check my Discord messages quick, though. Just in case it's something super relevant. And it's not. Okay. We can move on to 'Tis Time for Torture, Princess. This is another banger. This is another one I really enjoyed. Another good example of limited access, episodic, pleasure-focused slice of life. And within the subgenre of that, of captured princess, or a lapsed soul. And this sounds like a joke, but this is like a real genre. It's a really burgeoning, increasing in popularity genre in the world of manga right now. And this subgenre as well is like real and legit, and we've actually already covered another one in another anime review video, that being The Sleepy Princess and the Demon Castle. Other popular lapsed soul subgenres include periodically released from some prison, reverse isekai, where someone from a fantasy-esque world appears in the real world, magical de-aging, where elderly people are given the gift of youth and now have the energy and exuberance to explore the modern world. Office worker after work, probably the most down-to-earth and mundane one. So what am I talking about here? What is this involved? It's usually just some premise that makes everyday pleasures, usually with an emphasis on food, suddenly somehow novel, rare, scarce, and worthy of a lot of focus, attention, and delight. And a plot that comprises pretty much solely of seeking out those pleasures and enjoying them, usually just kind of one by one, with each episode providing a singular opportunity to do one otherwise kind of mundane, down-to-earth, commonly accessible pleasure, and just focusing on how wonderful and unique and beautiful it is when it is kind of delivered to you in rarity and isolation. By making the wrapping premise of these typically very silly, you know, a princess that is captured and tortured by trading secrets of her kingdom for access to food, or a princess who is captured and desires a good night's sleep more than anything and goes to strange lengths to enjoy all of the different pleasures of a well-made bed and things you enjoy right before sleep and blah blah blah. Really absurd stuff, really goofy stuff. The interior experience of actually just focusing in on the food or the pillow or whatever is so pure. It's just about the sheer, sincere joy of everything that our dear princess missed out on, both by being captured and then also by growing up in this kind of nobility where she wasn't able to indulge in a lot of these joys. Lots of food, but I wish there was more food. All of the volume covers when I was checking out this series at first had food on them, so I thought it was going to be like 75% food, but it's really only like 25% food. And that's very disappointing to me, as someone who loves food. And I also wish that the food sequences were less hallucination-based and more excuse me. And more description-based. And this is kind of like the two major modes in which you can engage with food in anime and manga. Either you eat it and you go, oh my gosh, it's so fluffy, I feel like I'm like bouncing around on clouds, and it just shows you like bouncing around on clouds, and you're just in like ecstasy. Or you eat it and you go, the way my tongue can just trivially break down these pancakes. They're so insubstantial, and yet my whole mouth is filled with the sweet warmness. The syrup I added is cutting through with this more direct sweet flavor, but the tartness of the berries in my next bite, I'm sure, will contrast that so wonderfully and make every bite just an instant craving. That description focus I actually appreciate a lot more, because then it's like, yeah, I can picture that, I can enjoy that. I can vicariously enjoy that food. Bouncing around on a cloud, I don't know what that feels like. That doesn't really tell me that much about the food, really. So yeah, I'm definitely more of a fan of the description mode, but the hallucination mode is very fun, especially in anime. They can use it as an excuse to do like a really wide variety of shots and really go all in on kind of like the sakuga of it and stuff. I love the way this series is built up with as like a complete non-fantasy, but the tropes of fantasy. Like, she's in a castle and there's a demon lord and there's all these other demons that come to quote unquote torture her. There's ogres and giants and mummies and all that stuff. But like, it's just modern Japan. It's just very blatantly modern Japan. Like, they go to amusement parks and convenience stores and shrines and sports days, and it shows like the demon lord's house, and it's just like a typical Japanese apartment. Like, it's really blatantly just modern Japan outside of the few fantastical settings we see. So it's like, I don't know, you kind of get the best of both worlds, because then you can really lean into very commonly accessible pleasures and really kind of enjoy and explore those, while also having the fun of this very fantasy light world building. Just having fun character designs and the absurdity of seeing this ogre drive a car around, and like at the sports day, seeing all the demon children were very cute and very fun world character designs. And just when it seems a little too saccharine, a little too cutesy, a little too idyllic, watching the Demon King's daughter at the sports fest is like globs and globs of sugar in terms of just how over-the-top cute it is and how peaceful and wonderful and idyllic everything is. You're reminded, though, that this is actually such a demented scenario. It's like so evil what she's doing over and over again for things like convenience store food, or just to have fun at the beach, or, the cheapest, most accessible things ever. She's selling out her people over and over and over again, giving up, what may be critical secrets that will lead to their doom. And just through sheer pure luck and apathy, does this not lead to gigantic irreversible violence? Like, it's so funny to me. Just how twisted the premise is and how easily you forget that. And it really gives a nice balance to the whole series. Before we get to the score, though, let's give a quick manga recommendation interlude. It's a golden age for this genre right now, which I already forget my goofy acronym, but I read as much as I can of this genre. I really enjoy it. And one of my favorites, quickly becoming not just one of my favorites in the genre, but one of my favorite manga ever. You may already know what it is, and if you do, you are a real one. You are an OG. And if you're slightly less of an OG, you might recognize this character from Kaiji, or recognize this art style as distinctly Fukumoto-esque. But this is in fact a spin-off of Kaiji, focusing on the villain of this one arc. Hancho, the foreman, Otsuki, who sets up this devilish gamble to swindle everyone in this underground illegal labor camp out of their money, eventually leading to Kaiji rising up with the poor indebted workers and striking him down in what's one of my favorite arcs of the whole series. This instead is an arc about how the foreman, due to his special privileges, gets to very frequently take one-day excursions away from the labor camp, where he, like, basically just kind of goes to restaurants, or goes fishing, or checks out kind of touristy spots around Tokyo, and builds up his friendships with some of his associates, and even some of the people sent to monitor him to make sure he doesn't want to run away on these outings. And it's just an absolute delight. It's funny. It has some of the best kind of exploration and description of food I've seen in any manga. It really captures just this feeling of joy around everyday pleasures. And right now, the person scanlating it, this very dedicated one-person team, has been cranking out scanlated chapters at like a really unprecedented pace. Like, I haven't really seen this from almost any scanlation group ever. For a while, it was like a chapter a day, and that was such a treat. So I really recommend checking this one out, getting caught up on it. It's so much fun. And if this genre sounds appealing to you, I think this is a great entry point. It even has that same sort of balance I was talking about in Hime-sama here, where it's like everything is so joyful and wonderful and just this everyday pleasure being highlighted. But at the same time, it's like these are really awful people that are screwing over their fellow indebted hard labor workers. And the whole situation is predicated on this like insanely evil company that's entrapped all of these people in this underground labor camp. And I don't know, it's so crazy. It's so good. Check it out. The One Day Outing Foreman. You should be able to find it if you search that. But yeah, I really like this one. I love this genre, and I think this is a stellar example of it. I'll give this a 8.5 out of 10. Okay. Now it's time for the hot takes. Those, I think, were pretty warm takes. But now we are going to maybe cause some controversy. I didn't like this anywhere near as much as most people. Frieren, I had a lot of hopes for. It's like one of the most highly rated manga on MangaDex. People go crazy for this series. It just wasn't for me. It was fine, but it just wasn't for me. Let's excruciatingly dive into why. At this point, honestly, I'm like kind of surprised it's as well liked as it is. I could see the series being popular. I could see the series having a fandom for sure. But the fact that it is like so praised to the high heavens, the fact that it's like in the top 5 highest rated manga on MangaDex, and that I think the anime is like one of the highest rated anime on my anime list and stuff, I just don't really get it. I feel like people kind of got tricked. We'll start with the stuff I like, which was mostly kind of stuff around the beginning of the show. The production is really gorgeous. Shot composition in the most tranquil scenes is just so cinematic, so engrossing, just kind of sweeps you away to this world. Extremely well paced and composed cinematography. Everything just sort of unfolding at this very naturalistic, very soothing, embracing kind of rhythm, balanced with really nuanced character works. The characters are so alive in every scene. Often it's very subtle, but their emotions just kind of come across so well, so compellingly. Really wonderful soundtrack from Evan Call. Very richly atmospheric. I thought it was Kevin Penkin, I'm not going to lie, which is high praise because that guy's a genius. I just knew it was some Western guy did the series music, and I got it mixed up. And that's the highest praise I can give it. All of this building into a really deep emotional mood that I have encountered way more often in like cinema, like live action cinema, than I have in anime. It reminded me at times of Ozu, you know, that kind of sad, reflective stillness of Wong Kar-wai, just this open longing, you know, longing out into the wide world with almost no possible target, of Hamaguchi, these long, studious takes of characters displaying just this kind of low burning, humble competence, making their way through the world while also kind of holding deep within them this sorrow. And this is high praise. This is stuff that I recognized as being very special about this show, and in my mind was like, oh, okay, this is why people are going nuts for it, because this is stuff that you don't normally get from anime. And it's used perfectly to tell this melancholy, wistful story. You know, it's your typical fantasy setup that there was a demon king that was waging war against the human race until a party, the hero's party, quested across all of the lands, and after many battles, setbacks, triumphs, connections, accomplishments, they were able to defeat the demon lord. And now, it's 50 years later, the world is in an era of peace. The legendary mage from that legendary party, an elf that lives for thousands and thousands of years. It's still not clear to me how long Frieren has been alive and is going to live, and that's very deliberate. Visiting her former comrades in their last moments, seeing the new world that she helped usher in, a story of time and loss and change. This was good stuff. And honestly, like, as impressed as I was, it wasn't even that I was, like, blown away. It wasn't that I was, like, sobbing at the end of every episode. It was 10 out of 10 I cried territory. But I really wanted to see more of this. I had this feeling that it was only going to mature further. That you were going to delve deeper into these themes. That the feelings of loss and change, but just kind of, like, hope and seeing your impact reflected in the world, we're going to just grow deeper and deeper, and that as she explored the world, you were going to see more and more different things in this light. And I was like, yeah, this has a lot of potential. This is really strong. And then what it is not that, though. what the actual focus of the story ends up being is not really any of this. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about stuff that I did mostly like, and that as I got into the series and saw how it was going to operate in the long run, I realized more and more, this is the appeal. This is what makes the series so popular. It's a lot of the series' popularity, a lot of the appeal, a lot of the discussion points is based on Frieren, the main character, this semi-immortal elf, and Fern, her disciple, this human kid who she trained from a young age and accompanies her on this journey. And I can see why. These are very lovable characters. They have very well animated, funny faces that have become lots and lots of memes, and they have lots of memorable quirks and moments where they do silly things, and these become very memeable moments, and, you know, things that they repeat all the time, things that they're bad at. This is what builds up, like, a real endearing quality to the characters that has caught on like wildfire. At first through the manga, at first in Japan, but now through the anime and all sorts of Western audiences as well. People love these silly little autists. And most stuff, you know, most character dynamics that involve a character like this uses kind of like an autistic setup, non-autistic straight man dynamic, where there's somebody who's kind of socially oblivious or quirky or, you know, has various kind of social pratfalls or whatever, is balanced out and is reprimanded, and it's your classic kind of Tsukomi bokeh dynamic, where there's a straight man who is, you know, neurotypical and is like, that's silly, that's weird, that's dumb. But here it's like very nice because it's this kind of tangled hierarchy of autism. And I'm saying autism and autist and all this stuff a lot. I don't mean it insultingly. I don't mean it as like derogatory or anything like that. And I don't think it's like only a source of comedy. But I think it's very relatable to a lot of anime watchers. I think it's just a fact that this is very typical of certain anime archetypes. Like, that's really what they are, and of a lot of anime viewers. And I don't mean that insultingly at all. I love autistic people. I'm pretty autistic myself. So I think this is a great dynamic to, instead of having like reprimanding straight man characters, instead have this very quirky little party where Frieren and Fern have to kind of navigate things together, and they're each good at some stuff but each very oblivious at other stuff, and they stumble over each other and they help each other grow. It's wonderful. It's, I think, very relatable to like a lot of people in the audience, and they make these characters really lovable, not in spite of these qualities, but because of these qualities. It's really well done, and I can see why these characters are so popular. I think my friend who was watching the series and had a lot of the same opinions as me when we talked about it, really said it best. When I see Frieren and Fern on screen, I smile. But when I don't, I frown. I think this is like the heart of the show, is these two characters and their interactions. I just, it's very well observed, very well characterized. But none of the other characters really interested me that much. Like, I don't know, like Stark was pretty cool. I kind of liked his arc and his dynamic, but even then, they just all seem very cliche, very like underdesigned, one-dimensional, just kind of hitting the same note over and over again. Not many of them really have arcs to speak of at all, which is fair because the vast majority of characters just show up in one arc or in one episode and you kind of move on. But at the same time, it's just, they just kind of like show up and you're like introduced to them as, oh, it's like this type of guy and he's gonna have this type of role. And then that's it. And there's not really anything more than that. Their dynamics, like this whole Fern Stark kind of sparks of romance or interest in one another or whatever, just feel very like obligatory. Like it just kind of felt like they needed to have that kind of element in the story, but very, very underdeveloped. There just like wasn't really anything there that was like unique or interesting or changing over time. Again, it was just kind of the same note over and over again. And so many plot lines, like almost all of the plot lines that involved interactions between the characters, even if they had some good moments, were essentially just the pattern of, oh, I was being cold, or it at least appeared that I was being cold, but actually I was being sentimental and warm, and this is revealed at the end. Just over and over again. So many birthdays. They care about their birthdays, so I don't... Why? It's just so... There's like nothing to it. Oh, it's Stark's birthday. Oh, okay. It's Stark's birthday again. Oh, okay. And there's no real like social grounding to anything. All of this is just interactions between individuals. We'll get into this more later, but it just kind of feels blank. Like, it just feels very insubstantial to me. And here's my hot take, okay? I think all of these criticisms of the cast at large and the relationships at large are also pretty true of Frieren and Fern. Like, I don't actually think their characters are really all that interesting or fresh or deep. It's just that they're very likable. And that's not nothing. I think having likable characters is great, and that likability in many situations, and in series like this, especially with your main characters, is actually more important than the characters being interesting and dynamic and stuff. But it's just like, even the parts of the show I enjoyed, even though I really did genuinely enjoy the Frieren Fern dynamic, it's not really that interesting. I just sort of think this is very relatable and very likable, you know? Autistic elf girl save me. But is it that interesting? I don't think so. I don't think there's that much there. Okay. So that's characters. What about, like, the world? I think Frieren's character could actually be a lot more interesting and a lot more kind of, like, dynamic and compelling and changes and grows if this was the type of story that I really wished this was. So like I said before, I thought this was going to be a story where she lives in peace. And she had spent all this time training as a battle mage and fighting these epic fights against demons and whatever. But now that's all irrelevant, and she has to really switch gears to live in this world. She learns to discover magic that helps people peacefully. She relearns that she still has value in this world. And I thought this would be kind of like an awkward, disjointed process where she encounters kind of mundane situations that she can help with, but at first she isn't really sure how she can apply her skills and knowledge, and how her knowledge of the world is so out of date and stuff. But slowly, bit by bit, she realizes that she still has a lot to contribute, that she's still a very talented and powerful person that can do a lot in this world of peace. Seeing how things have changed, how things that she viewed as threats before are now pacified, how people age and die, and how things are completely different now. And if they needed action scenes, and I mean, the action scenes are very well made in this series, so, like, I can tell why they wanted to do them. Madhouse is phenomenal at a good action scene. It's not wrong strictly to want to include those too. Just have flashbacks to the Heroes Party adventure as like contrast, right? That's so free. You know, you show up at a place, it's just this peaceful, tranquil village, and Frieren is like, damn, we fought a dragon here. Isn't that crazy? That field over there used to be, like, razed to the ground. Look, we can go over, you can still see the charred ashes. And then you flash back to the fight against the dragon, and it's, like, freaking awesome, right? Oh, this is where I fought a demon. But now the demons are just part of society. We'll get to that more later. I think this idea of, like, this elderly autistic woman coming to terms with all of this stuff and like, re-seeing her position in the world and reevaluating everything and seeing how wonderful her impact has been, but then still wanting to connect more and to enjoy this life that she helped usher in. That's such a unique story. That's so cool. That would give her character so much room to grow and change and... But, like, no. There's so much fighting. Every substantial arc, like arcs that go on for more than a few chapters or episodes, is really just about fighting in the end. It's about the extent that these above themes occur. They're usually either just kind of like set dressing, or small inter-arc episodes, interludes, and the vast majority of the time, the crux of the arc, the major substantial thing that Frieren gets involved in is blowing shit up. And sometimes these themes are directly refuted by the supremacy of violence. Like, you go in thinking, wow, things have changed. Things are peaceful now. Wow, things are so different because of Frieren. Wow, her violent past is now kind of irrelevant. No. It ends up being, things haven't changed. Frieren still needs to blow motherfuckers up. That's what she's good for. That's the thing she can do that no one else can do. Like, why are there so many fight scenes? It's like absurd to me. What happened to this era of peace? Why is there so much focus and discussion on the nature of combat magic? Like, why do I care? Why does the fact that Frieren can suppress her mana and people underestimate her and then she hits them with a nuke, why is that such an important thing to focus on, that there's like multiple episodes with long scenes like discussing how rare a talent that is? I don't care. I don't care about the battle mechanics of this fantasy world. This, I didn't think, was that type of series. If I wanted that, I would read literally any other isekai. And I know this isn't an isekai, but this is the sort of shit that happens in isekais that makes me not care about isekais. Is like deviating from unique themes and plot lines and unique aspects of characterization to be like, oh, her mana is higher, but Frieren has lived a long time, so her mana is secretly even higher, but she has an ancient relic that can subjugate and control people that have less mana, but secretly Frieren has more mana. And I don't care. Oh, this is the ancient spell Zoltrak. But Fern can cast it really fast because she didn't learn modern magic techniques. Frieren taught her the old magic techniques, but there's even older magic techniques, and this demon doesn't know that his new magic techniques are now the old magic techniques. The arms race between, I mean, I'm kind of making it sound interesting, and it is kind of interesting, but it's just like anybody could do that. I don't care. What? Why is this the era of peace? Why is this the series that's all about after the battle with the demon, and then it's like about battles with demons? What did they even do? Like, what was so beautiful and substantial about beating the demon lord if the whole series is about fighting monsters and demons? Like, what? I just don't get it. What happened to the premise? And I mean, okay, like I said, Madhouse is really good at this stuff. I understand why they wanted a lot of fight scenes. Because the fight scenes are awesome. They're full of Sakuga. They're full of really creative ideas. Just immaculate, amazing effects, amazing animation techniques, the explosiveness of them, the kineticness of them. They're awesome. Like, woo. But, like, it feels like something was really sacrificed to just orient the series so much around this combat axis. Let's have a quick aside about demons. This was the arc. I was already, like, my interest was kind of flagging. I was like, why are they fucking fighting stuff all the time? But this is really, my problems really started, and I really started wondering, like, what the hell are they doing? In the arc where they visit a city that's, like, wrought with demons, okay? I shouldn't say wrought. I don't know why I put rot here. There's like 3 demons. They go into the city and there's 3 demons. And the demons are there. Okay, this is minor spoilers for episodes 7 to 10, but we're just kind of talk about the arc and the big substantial strokes, and I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. You can skip ahead if you really want, but I think if you're like, what is this broad talking about? Frieren's awesome. This, I think, really gets at the heart of what I think is written very strangely and poorly about the series. So the demons are Frieren's, like, ancient enemies. They're in the city, though, to negotiate peace talks. Their leader has been besieging the city for years and years for, like, some reason. That's not very well explained at first. But they seem like reasonable people, the demons. You know, they're dressed up in human clothes, they're chatting, they have all this decorum and politeness and stuff. I thought this would be a story of, like, so Frieren is racist. She sees the demons and immediately tries to kill them. As soon as she sees them in the streets, she has to get restrained, and the human acts as like a body shield, I think, something like that. They managed to stop Frieren. But then I thought over the arc she would realize, oh, shit has changed in 50 years. The surviving demons are living totally different lives than the Demon King's army. Maybe the demons like actually have some legitimate claims to coexistence, and it's like the humans are in the wrong here, and it's like the humans are too prejudiced and won't let the demons integrate into society, which is leading to this conflict. And I thought it would all be about Frieren coming to realize this shit's changed, and she's like out of date. You know, she really struggles to come to this realization. It's an actual, you know, major test for her. But eventually she comes to accept that the demons have changed, and she makes peace with them. But no. They are evil! She was right to be racist. She should have been even more racist. It would have been much better for everyone if she, like, ignored everything and maybe accidentally killed a human as well and just murdered them right there in the streets. Everyone else is actually pretty stupid in this situation because they fell for the demons' tricks and they've forgotten how evil demons really are. And Frieren was right all along. Her thinking did not need to change at all in 50 years. And everyone else just got too pacified and forgot that the correct thing to do is to be racist. The demons are inherently pure evil, and it is like genetically impossible for them to be good. They explain, and this is actually kind of cool world building, that demons are just a very evolved type of monster, that, you know, there was monsters in the past that realized they could get human prey by emulating the sound of human voices crying out for help, and then they just evolved to be more and more and more sophisticated until they were able to use human language and human culture and human appearances to such a degree that they can manipulate people to this extent. And they show like an example of this, like a demon kid that tricks people into letting her live in a family and then ends up like murdering everybody. And it's just like, oh, this is just how they are. Like they just exist to kill and eat humans. And so, of course, this leads to big fight scenes, and everybody fights, and in the end, Frieren tells the leader to kill herself. It's just like, okay. So yeah, it was, like, kind of disappointing that it unfolded like that, with just more fighting, very generic fights. But I think it also just exemplifies, like, a very limited imagination for the series. That what the series can conceive of as possible, and the stories that it feels equipped to tell, the challenges that it wants to take on in storytelling, I just think are very limited. So let's get into this. So I guess this is a not so quick aside about demons. I'm not saying that having a intelligent race that is inherently evil is like always bad. In fact, I think it's actually kind of subversive these days, because the pendulum has swung now so far into having your villainous race be sympathetically or explicably evil, like there's some motivation, there's some tragic past or whatever, or just outright there is no evil races, there is good and bad within all of these different fantasy species. So it's kind of subversive to have, you know, oh, this is an intelligent human-like species, but actually they are, for no other reason than just genetics, extremely evil. So a lot of this discourse has unfolded around tabletop RPGs, recently have been changing their racial systems to say, hey, if you play an orc, that doesn't mean that you're evil aligned. We're disassociating those two things. You can be a good orc. Lord of the Rings discourse, people kind of revisiting that series and saying, hey, is it reasonable that the orcs and the... Who else was evil? The ring wraiths? The ring... Oh my god, I'm going to start trying to explain Lord of the Rings lore, but, you know, there's been a lot of discourse around this. And usually, the focal point of this discourse is around, is this evil race being used as an allegory for an IRL race? Which is, like, yeah, that's kind of problematic when you do that. To say, yeah, those savage races from overseas are orcs that, you know, have a lot of hallmarks in common with... that's no good. But that's a whole other can of worms. That's definitely not what's happening here. They're not trying to say the demons are, like, British or something. And yeah, you know... When I say Frieren is a huge racist, or this arc, the moral of this arc is that it is correct to be racist, I'm just like joking. I'm kidding. Like, I just think that sounds funny to say. And it's technically true, but that isn't my actual criticism. Like, I don't think this arc is bad because it tells you that Frieren was correct to be prejudiced or whatever. My criticisms are elsewhere. But it just makes the series feel very unreal that this is just sort of accepted and that the characters like don't see this as like strange. And I don't think it should like full 180 into like Demon Advocacy Club. You know, oh, our ultimate goal is to cast a spell that makes all the demons like unevil. But there needs to be like something there. There needs to be a sense that this is tragic. That we can never overcome this gap. That there is another very intelligent species coexisting with us, but just inherently we have to fight with them. There needs to be some emotional impact to the characters living in this world. And it's like, kind of, like they do try to have kind of some emotional realism on the individual level, where like the Duke of the town that got tricked is like, I can't believe I got tricked. And Frieren's like, yeah, they'll trick you. But there's no sense of like, God, I was so much happier when I thought they could be negotiated with. There's no real like tragic depth to it. And I will say, and this is maybe a little bit extra spoilers, but I'm reading the manga now. I'm caught up on the manga actually. And there is like some future arcs that kind of delve into this a little deeper. And I won't get into the details again because I don't want to like spoil stuff unnecessarily. But it's still unsatisfying to me. It's still just kind of like blank. That it all ultimately just keeps resolving to this is the way it is. And kind of like the concept of the demons and this parallel evolution, this convergent evolution that makes them human-like predators. It's interesting, but it's not really subverted in any way that makes you think, oh, this is going to be like expanded on. This is going to change. This is going to drive an interesting plot line. No, it just drives more fights. It's all just about fights. We see, yeah, like I said before, this flashback to a demon orphan that starts to suggest these plot lines. The story of taking in a demon child and trying to raise it as a human, and in the end it just like kills everybody because it can't understand the logic of like killing is bad. But that doesn't go anywhere. And again, the moral of that story is they should have just murdered the demon child at the first opportunity they got. And it's just this insubstantialness, you know? For them to care as little as they did, they just move on. And especially like the humans that aren't Fern and Frieren, who have, you know, talked endlessly about the Demon King and all of the horrors and stuff. It's like, I don't know, it's just weird, man. It's just like, all the characters kind of feel a little sociopathic. Like, they don't really inhabit emotionally the world that they're in. They just, like, physically inhabit it. And they're just kind of doing stuff. But I suppose you can say that's true of humans in the real world, that we overlook all sorts of atrocities and we don't let them emotionally affect us anywhere near as much as they ought to. But I don't know. It's like when you're building a fantasy world building, when you're building a fantasy world, when you're creating all this world building, it's just sort of like there's levels to it, you know? There's like a surface level that motivates plot, and then there's like another social level that kind of builds out how people really would be emotionally if they lived in that world. And I just feel like there isn't that second layer in this series. We'll get into that more here. And I think this is kind of why there's such a focus on battles, where the non-battle stories are just very quick and episodic and kind of formulaic, and that the real depth and exposition and mechanics and dynamics are all just around combat. And I think it's just because of this limited world building. And here, I feel like I'm being unfair, because we're watching Dungeon Meshi at the same time, and I reread Dungeon Meshi recently, and I love Dungeon Meshi, and I think it's just my all-time favorite in this sort of traditional fantasy world building, in taking fantasy tropes, building a plot with them, and then building a substantial societal world that reflects how people would actually live if all of this stuff was real. There just isn't really anything interesting that can happen besides fighting. Right? What could there be? I can only think of one real climactic moment that does not involve fighting. And even then, it's all about, what if we did fight? How much mana do you have? How much are you suppressing your mana? How much can you observe my mana? How much sensitivity to mana do you have? Mana. I don't care. There's no real societal stuff. The suggestions of society they do provide are just so generic, static, and flat. There's like a magic society. There's some towns that have like history. There's a couple different species and races and stuff. There's a demon lord that we know very little about. They're very generic. They're very static, where all of the stuff that kind of established them has already happened in the past, which is like kind of the theme of the series, but at the same time, it's like none of these things can therefore have a story built around them, drive a plot line, have twists, have revelations, change the characters as they experience them. They just like are the way they are. Any change is almost always negative. Almost all the stories are about preserving the status quo. Oh, we have just like a peaceful little idyllic village, but a monster is harassing us. That happens like 18 times. So you have to go kill the monster. There's no sense of showing up and trying to strike out like a positive change and to change systems and stuff. Like, compare it to One Piece. There's like almost any given One Piece arc has way more sense of a complex society that is impacting the people who live there emotionally and needs to be set right in some way, either due to a negative external pressure or just kind of like festering internal problems. And then the crew shows up and changes shit. Everything is so individual too. Everything is connected by individual action and coincidence. Everybody like knows each other, or Frieren like knows their dad, or they're the trainee or descendant of someone specific. Everyone is setting out to find specific people. There's no sense of like societal relationships that can kind of grow and change archetypically. Instead, it's all just kind of down to people's individual judgment and individual interactions. And that's just less interesting. It makes things kind of more shallow and more repetitive. So in the end, it's like, why is this so popular? Why is this so beloved? Because all these criticisms, they're not that bad. Because the vast majority of anime is like this. Like, I think all isekai that I know of has these same problems. And to probably much greater extents. I would say most anime world building is solidly just at that first level of, like, plot motivating convenience. And very, very rarely starts scraping down to the lower level of real societal interaction. So it's like not a condemnation of Frieren as a whole to say all this stuff. It's just like, what else is there? Why is this so beloved? Like, it's just very generic fantasy battle action series that at one point had some very moving moments, but now just kind of uses those as like window dressing, you know? Oh, Frieren is going to have another flashback to Himmel. She's sad that Himmel is dead. It's happened over and over again. What is novel about that? That happens in so many series. You know somebody that's dead and you're sad about it. I really think it just kind of comes down to the character dynamic of Fern and Frieren. Like, I think that is really what makes this series unique, if anything. And it really feels like the opening mood, before they just started fucking fighting everything, has just been stretched. The goodwill of that and the feelings people had around that has been stretched so thin to provide this kind of false veneer of like emotional depth over the whole series. Maybe the manga will be more interesting. I read the manga since I wrote these slides. I read it pretty quickly. it was like fine. It was compelling. I wanted to see what would happen, but it never really got any more interesting. Not yet. Like there, I will say some of the arcs I liked better than any of the arcs in the anime. That oh, excuse me. The El Dorado arc. If any of the people watching this are reading the manga, I thought the El Dorado arc was good. It was like well constructed. It had interesting twists and stuff. But it still has all the same problems I have with this. Like, it hasn't really changed. It hasn't really gotten more interesting. It's just the same very kind of shallow battle fantasy. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. Let me know. Like, what did you like about this series? Especially if you loved it. Especially if this is, like, your favorite anime ever. Like, why? Is it because Frieren makes funny faces? That's fine. That's fine if it is. I'm not saying that's wrong. I just don't get it. I feel like I'm missing something. This is one of the big climactic battles. I don't think I spent long enough praising this, but the battle sequences are phenomenally animated. There is so much cool stuff in them, and I can't, understate that. In this one here, it reminded me of Kyoso Giga, which is really, really high praise, because Kyoso Giga has some of the most, like, interesting action sequences ever. But Kyoso Giga also has an interesting plot. But yeah, this was like crazy shit. So overall, like I still give it an 8. Like I think it's still very well made. The production is still phenomenal. I just was so disappointed with how generic it ended up being. That it really did not feel special to me at all past a certain point. Okay, moving on though. Wow, we're an hour and a half in. I still got 2 more shows, but one of them is short. This is the other one I got a lot to say about. The Apothecary Diaries. Another critically acclaimed manga. This time, an actual score by Kevin Penkin. I guess I got those mixed up. Adapted lovingly and expertly by OLM, who's been really killing it lately. I think they've done a lot of great work. Into a 24-episode series. I think that needs to be emphasized. Undead Unluck, Frieren, and this were all 24-episode series. Like, 2 Core is back, baby, and I'm so happy. We're over the era of, like, super crammed, rushed 12-episode nonsense. If you've got a great manga, give it time to breathe and build a fan base and really explore what makes it so great. And another example of this genre that I would call the magical dream suffering girl period piece. And if you want to see me kind of break down the hallmarks of that genre more and kind of my conceptions of it and my first brushes with really diving into it, last summer I reviewed My Happy Marriage, and I talked about all of this stuff kind of more generically. So check that out. I didn't really think I liked the genre. I wasn't really interested in it from the jump, and none of the series appealed to me too much. And then when I watched My Happy Marriage, I didn't like it all that much, so I didn't have very high hopes for this one. I expected to like Frieren a lot more, honestly. I thought Frieren was going to be way more interesting. But no, this was a banger. I loved this one. Really awesome production. It's very cinematic and precise at times with these very expertly constructed sequences. But then, just as quickly it breaks into a total diegetic break where the characters are portrayed so goofily and it has that kind of like Shaftian imaginative quality. The soundtrack was really good. Kevin Penkin, again, killing it. A lot of really period sounding stuff to just kind of set the scene and bring you into the mood of this old imperial palace. But then it gets very diverse, very experimental at times. Something I really associate with Kevin Penkin, just little electronic elements, very cool rhythmic elements. Awesome emotional balance, some really tragically sad moments, but then some very funny moments, really thrilling action moments. Nothing over the top, nothing becoming too melodramatic, nothing feeling like you're wallowing in stuff or ever getting too goofy or ever getting so action-packed that it feels distracting. But just this really nice balance and rhythm where every episode kind of incorporated these different moods. Awesome characters, mostly I don't know, I could really get into depth with some of the character arcs and some aspects that I find a little substandard, but it's only because the standard is so high, and the vast majority of the characters I actually really liked. Some of them are consistently very funny, some of them very, very endearing, and some of them very compellingly scary that you felt a gravity to them and you realized what an impact they were going to have. The setting, which I really expected to hate because, as I said, these sorts of period pieces don't really appeal to me, and this is as period as it gets. I actually found very compelling. It was really educational to explore the inner workings of the palace and its relationship with the pleasure district outside of it, learning about everybody's job, learning about how this whole thing functions. And it was often really weirdly cozy as our protagonist kind of settles in and establishes these routines and relationships and stuff. Just this kind of feeling of this like self-sustaining, well, not actually self-sustaining because they import a lot of stuff, but this like self-governing, self-regulating little kind of clockwork mechanism that is the palace. Just inhabiting that and knowing what you ought to be doing. I don't know. It was like almost like idyllic. Like I kind of wanted to live in the society like that, which is messed up because it is the horrible, horrible society. But it was weirdly cozy. It was like, yes, my little life in the rear palace. And the messaging, although still a bit disappointing. Oh, did I forget to finish writing this? Yeah, whoops. I was about to say, the messaging, although still a bit disappointing, at least kind of spoke to some awareness, some reflection on society as a whole. But we'll get into that more later. And really, in the end, this was not a MDSGPB series, Magical Dream Suffering Girl period piece. After all, really, it was like an episodic mystery show in its overall structure and stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is the actual genre here? What are we doing episode by episode? It was a lot of fun for me. It reminded me a lot of House. These kind of procedural mysteries where someone very brilliant breaks down a wide range of environmental, medical, personality-based clues and draws some sort of diagnostic conclusion. The mysteries were very well situated in the environment that we were learning about. Like, we kind of learn about the proper order of things in the palace, and then we're primed for some disruption, some subversion that... and then this critical person was poisoned. And then you have to kind of work with that environmental knowledge to figure out what ramifications is this going to have and who it might be motivated to make those things happen. Then there's like a very reasonable number of twists and turns as Mao Mao starts to piece things together and unravel the mystery. It's like surprising but not absurd. You don't feel like you're being strung along too much, where you're led to believe for like the whole episode that it's one way, and then because of the most absurd, unpredictable aspect, it's actually like 180 from that. Instead, it's like a nice, slowly shifting perception as more and more surprising but not unreasonable things are brought to light. And usually, and this is what impresses me the most, there's one, but only one aspect of the mystery that requires Mao Mao's cheat code knowledge of herbs, poisons, medications, all this stuff. Usually she's brought in because she has this knowledge, so it kind of makes sense that is an aspect of it. And it's the one thing that kind of makes it unsolvable for the astute viewer who's kind of trying to follow along. There's usually like one kind of gap where it's like, but yeah, the flowers they use in that tea is actually poisonous under this circumstance. One little thing like that kind of just utilizes Mao Mao's unique powers, I think is great. I think that's just the right level of spice. And it's cool too, because you learn about that apothecary stuff, or you learn about other similar arcane topics of metallurgy and woodworking and ritual back in this era. It's great to kind of flavor it like that, but on the other hand, make the substantial parts of the mystery still about motive and opportunity and you know, kind of piecing those things together with environmental knowledge that's just as true today as it would have been in this time period. And as much as I appreciated how episodic these adventures were, like most episodes had like a nice open and shut mystery, I also really felt it so satisfying. It really hit when these plot lines started linking together into greater conspiracies. When Mao Mao starts to realize, hey, the person who did this actually had a motive to do this other thing as well. And this great tangled web starts to build up in her mind. Sometimes even whole subplots and character arcs kind of took on the feel of these mysteries, where at first it kind of felt like, I don't know, you're just like learning about this character, or you're learning about this thing that happened in the palace, and then you realize, no, you're actually being given the ingredients of like a mystery that may unfold over multiple episodes or even multiple arcs. And this had mixed results for me. Sometimes I felt like you got strung along a little too much. Like I said, the kind of more disappointing formula of you're given 800 pieces of evidence that it's going to be one way, and then there's one insane piece of evidence that makes it actually the exact opposite of that way. That to me can be a little excessive, and sometimes I was a little frustrated if things were written too much in this mode. But at the same time, it's like I have to respect it, because it really shows like a mastery of setting up that kind of mystery over such an extended period with so many different elements. Like you could tell they had that whole kind of mechanism set up in place. And even though I wished it could have been a bit more balanced and a bit more reasonable, I still had kind of like an odd feeling alongside my frustration of like, oh. But sometimes though, when it hit just right, when it actually just kind of explained more than it befuddled, these grand schemes accumulating in these big earth-shattering revelations, those are some of my favorite moments in the whole series. There's one, I think about halfway through, where Mao Mao starts to really piece together that all of these different minor schemes and incidents were actually connected, and she like kind of like deduces. I love the attitude too that she was like, obviously no one person could guarantee that all of these could work, but if enough of them did, it could accumulate in this moment, and then she like, it clicks that this moment is actually about to happen, and you're like totally switched, where like all of these smaller incidents you realize were kind of irrelevant, and that it was all about this one moment. That like, ooh, that hits so good, dude. That was awesome. That episode is so good. So yeah, the format, the type of plots, all of these were fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about Mao Mao. I loved Mao Mao. At the heart of the show is our girl, our little apothecary mystery solver, dear Mao Mao. In many ways, I think she's the polar opposite of the protagonist of My Happy Marriage. And this isn't really important to either show. I just found it very funny how inverted she is. Like, rather than everyone just insta-loving or insta-hating her, pretty much everyone encounters Mao Mao with this, like, very hesitant, grounded skepticism. And then she earns very slowly through her actions their guarded trust and starts kind of developing this reputation that, you know, is still belied by the fact that nobody really knows what she's thinking or why she's doing anything. Where's my cursor? Did it somehow get all the way over on the TV? Is my mouse off? My mouse just turned off. Uh-oh. Okay, it's time for live troubleshooting. Oh, it's connected, paired. Hello? USB device not recognized. Hello? Okay, what if I unplug it? Because I was charging it. And it's like fully charged now. It should be working. Is it because my wireless keyboard is... Now, if I was a real YouTuber, this is where I would pause the video. Okay, I'm gonna unplug the wireless keyboard. Driver error. Yes. You can see my cursor there. MX Master 3 paired. What's wrong, buddy? Okay, I'm gonna turn off the mouse and turn it back on. If I was a real YouTuber, I would cut this out. But if you're watching this, it's obvious that I didn't. Okay, it's like flashing channel 1. I should look away, because if it turns on, the laser will blast me in the eye. What the fuck? Okay, to finish the video, we'll we'll take some desperate measures here. We're so close to the end. So I'm gonna plug in the wireless keyboard again. But I'm gonna find it. Okay, it's over here. Now we're gonna assume command position. Yeah, the mouse just it's not doing anything. Okay. So now it's wireless keyboard's job to get us through these last slides. Okay. What was I talking about? Mau Mau. My beloved Mau Mau. She's so cool. She has no status or inherent ability, but she grinds out these skills. She takes action. She wins the respect of people. Her desires are orthogonal to society's expectations. She just wants drugs. All she wants to do is play with herbs and ancient medicines and weird animal parts and combine them into various concoctions and see what they do. She doesn't care about really anything else. She does have a morality that, of course, underpins a lot of her decisions. She reflects on things that are happening. But that morality is subtle. It's often unstated. She's just kind of like this neutral observing party. It's a deep undercurrent that motivates her to do certain things, to make certain things happen, because she feels they're right. Most of the time, it's a very transactional thing where someone promises to give her some rare herbs if she solves a mystery. Instead of, you know, friggin' crying her head off about everything that's going on all the time, like another protagonist. She has, like, no romantic interests whatsoever. Although she is tossed into many, many romantic situations with her co-main character, Jinsei, who I didn't really say anything about in this review, I just realized, but whatever. I started to think, though, this counter-archetype of a character that is, like, so inverted from a typical MC and has such a different kind of alien motivation and worldview and stuff, in its own way, it is kind of becoming an archetype. Like, when she subverts all these very swooning moments of Jinsei sweeping her up and their faces coming so close, and she subverts those with, like, sarcastic indifference, she's still kind of playing into them. Like, it's still a plot line that is kind of dotted by them, and it's still, you know, depending on kind of your perspective and motivation for engaging with this series, it still gives you the catharsis and the sensational aspect of being in those romantic situations, if, you know, you are the type that is attracted to Jinsei or whatever. I talked about this a bit. If you remember, like, a million years ago, I made a video about some dynamics of rom-com writing and why I think, like, the oblivious MC in rom-coms really, like, works insofar as it kind of engages people. I also talked about another archetype, which is, like, the jaded MC, and I think this sort of falls into similar patterns, where you either self-insert or you self-insert as Jinsei and crush on Mau Mau. But either way, you're just kind of waiting and anticipating and feeling like you would, at a certain time, drop your guard, be honest with your feelings, embrace these romantic opportunities, whatever. That becomes kind of the mode of engagement in the series. And then, you know, I didn't hope she did that. I didn't, like, ship the two of them. I thought Jinsei was like a funny character, but I didn't think they were like good together or anything. So I was delighted every time she rebuffed him and hoped that that would just keep happening every single time. And I feel like that engagement is also encouraged. Like that also becomes part of the archetype, that there's sort of a inner war of fans of the character between will they finally get together or will she remain cynical and unavailable. I don't know. It's just like ultimately she's a great character. I really did like her as a character. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is a character kind of arrived at through just like a negative of a typical character, of a character that I wouldn't really find that interesting. So it isn't really like she's something wholly new. It isn't like she's really operating in dimensions we haven't seen before. It's just sort of like the script is flipped, but that's not much more than that. So one thing I really disliked about My Happy Marriage, and I talked about at length, is that it was very counter-revolutionary. Essentially, it was saying, okay, we have this system that empowers nobility to be cruel, unfair, chaotic, turmoil results from these horrible nobles doing horrible things. But the solution for this is for good nobles to be in charge. And I don't like that. I don't like when, that's the message of the series. That's like what the characters are aspiring towards. And there isn't really any imagination past that. Again, it's like not even just the morality of this messaging, but like the failure of imagination that bothers me. That makes the characters feel too simple and stuff. And I was expecting this to be pretty similar. And this was something I was kind of dreading, because I felt like that was just kind of the way this genre worked. And it kind of was. Like, most stories are about Mao Mao preserving the status quo. Somebody is instigating some scheme, and Mao Mao is able to expose it and neutralize it, or if it's too late and the dude is already poisoned, they're able to stop the consequence of that, or whatever. Things are settled down, and everything goes back to, like, neutral. There's this implied correctness and neutrality to the way things ought to go before somebody pops up with a scheme or something. And Mao Mao is always on the side of objective truth, that she's just exposing things that happened and bringing them to light, and therefore things return to before the subversiveness. At the same time, though, and this is something I really appreciate about the series, there is a lot of acknowledgement that the way that things typically go is pretty fucked up. There's a lot of tragic stories about the Emperor's concubines and how terrible a position they're put in, and how fucked up it is that he just has this stable of women to impregnate. There's a lot of really tragic stories about courtesans and how they are treated kind of like objects that are bought and sold by people, that they have no bodily agency. There's a lot of tragic stories about eunuchs, of how different court officials are castrated, and how unfair that is, and how it can be just done on the whim of somebody else, and there's no real benefit to it for everyone. Of humble tradespeople that are being taken advantage of by the nobility, that are toiling away, and it's like an unfair deal. These are great stories. I love this general trend. Oh, I was trying to use my mouse again. Of humanizing those in low places and condemning those in high places. I think that is good revolutionary messaging, to suggest that the way things are is not great, and that, there needs to be some consideration and some compensation for that. But this isn't just some objective neutral way of the world. This isn't just the way that things are, that things inevitably kind of return to. Basically, it's kind of saying, yeah, this is a tragic world, but it's even worse if some dastardly villain gets his way. But no, this isn't the neutral way. This is the way of the Emperor. This is the way that those in power have decreed society to operate. The world that Mao Mao is protecting and reinforcing with her indifferent truth-seeking is just the way that has been imposed by nobility. There's nothing objectively correct about it. And of course, the scope of the story doesn't need to be like, hey, they teamed up and overthrew the Emperor. But, like, I would like to see some acknowledgement that this is just one big system. Because as it stands, there's a lot of, like, very kind of emotionally disjoint moments where Mao Mao will be reflecting on the tragic life of a concubine and then is like, oh, well, alright, now the Emperor is asking me to do this, so I guess I gotta do it. Because he'll give me some herbs, and I want the herbs. And it's like kind of funny, and it like reflects her character, in a funny way. But it's just kind of like it disconnects me from the story a little bit. A lot of typos in these slides. I actually wrote these on my phone. This is system. Earlier I wrote current instead of current. Whatever. Okay, but yeah, I really like this one though. I think. Sort of like Frieren, but to a much lesser extent. The stuff that I want from it is just stuff that I rarely see ever. And what we got is already pretty great. So I'll give this a 9.5 as well. This was a phenomenal show. Okay. One last one to talk about briefly. Zom 100, The Bucket List of the Dead. This is a throwback. It aired way back in summer 2023. But it went on hiatus, and the last 3 episodes came out last December. But then we ended up only watching them now in kind of this inter-season spot where we had a bit of free time in our anime club. So now is when I'm going to review it. This is a fun show. It's just lively action comedy about checking off bucket list items in a zombie apocalypse. Great production from very fledgling studio Bug Films. I don't know the whole history of Bug Films, but they kind of came out of nowhere. They were doing a lot of production assistance for studios for a while, and this is their first kind of standalone production. And it's great. The explosive action, really fun character acting, good balance of very over-the-top zombie film pastiche, just kind of hitting you with the iconic images in a way that's often very comedic, but then also shifting gears to really genuine, thrilling, suspenseful sequences. I especially liked it. They did this pretty often. They dropped like the letterbox ultra wide framing for really kind of dramatic cinematic moments that again sometimes were pastiche and sometimes were very sincere, but that always had nice effects. The plot itself though, nothing I haven't really seen before. And this was disappointing because it opened with this idea that it was going to be like a very silly, indulgent wish fulfillment plotline. Because the premise is our main character used to work at a really terrible black company, that being the term for Japanese companies that violate labor laws and overwork you, underpay you, don't give you the breaks and holidays and stuff that you are entitled to. So he's suffering day in, day out at work. Then the zombie apocalypse happens, and his first thought is, this is like a dream, because I don't have to go to work anymore. And suddenly I am free to live out all of the fantasies I had accumulated and do everything I wanted to do. I'm free. And I thought that's a great premise. Like, it could even kind of fall into the genre we were talking about before, where all of these sort of typical everyday indulgences, having a nice meal, going to see the scenic vista, whatever, are now wrapped in the challenges of a zombie apocalypse. But I hoped it would retain that attitude and it would have a nice brisk pace of doing things he loved and always emphasizing that this is like the best thing that could have happened to him. That seemed like fun and subversive. But no, inevitably, and not really that surprisingly, it starts to really indulge in itself with some more gritty, dramatic, tragic stories and stuff around, your typical humans are the real monsters encountering other survivors that are even more abominable than the zombies and clashing with them and stuff. This stuff, it kind of made me check out. Like, there's a reason I don't typically seek out zombie stories, and it's because they're all kind of the same. And I've already seen Romero's Day of the Dead. I don't think they're gonna be better than Day of the Dead. And it's pretty rare that there's one that actually kind of keeps up some fresh perspective or some fresh twist on it. It really feels like they all just kind of collapse down into the same story. Like Gakugarashi, as much as I liked it, as much as I became endeared to the characters, as much as I was interested in the premise, and kind of seeing the mystery unfold, a lot of the times it was just kind of the same zombie story beats. Like, not many things escape it, and this certainly didn't. In those moments, yeah, it just really didn't feel that different than any other zombie thing. And it's a shame because the production was so lively and fun and unique. But they just weren't telling that interesting of a story. Most of the big emotional cathartic moments, you know, the climaxes of the arc where our main character has some major revelation, and at the same time is able to solve the immediate, usually zombie-related problem. They framed a lot of these as like breaking through some pre-apocalyptic trauma, sometimes related to working at that terrible company, sometimes related to experiences even before then, getting bullied and stuff. And it's like, well, I kind of like that idea that he's really growing as a person, but they felt very like obligatory. Like, it didn't really compel me in and of itself. It was just sort of like, oh, okay, so now it also has to tie back into that. Didn't really resonate with me. I don't know. Feels like no one has the guts for gutlessness. The fantasy of fantastical commitment. That is to say, they felt obligated and, like, pressured by expectations to have a zombie story that has gritty human drama and sacrifice and tragedy and you know, all these other kind of upsetting things that maybe in the modern era are all descended from like The Walking Dead. They couldn't just run with it's the zombie apocalypse and this guy's having the time of his life, because that would have been fun. That would have been something truly new and unique. Anyways, I mean, yeah, in the end, it did have a lot of moments of fun and levity and stuff. I just think it was so bogged down by kind of the cliches of the genre. I would give this an 8. Just a solid, good show, but not my favorite. Okay, that's it. We came in under 2 hours. That's fantastic, as I have to go run some errands and then go to a birthday party. Busy. But I'm glad I made time for this. I find doing these so satisfying. I hope you also enjoy watching them. We have an absolute heater of a season starting up now, where I'm watching, as always, like 4 or 5 shows with my anime club, and then at least 3 other shows on my own. So we'll have a lot to talk about. Look forward to that. Bye for now. Oh, I'm trying to use my mouse again. I gotta figure. That's the first thing I gotta do is figure out why my mouse isn't working. Okay, bye.